of ama-industries. Silabo abe-Civil Aviation Authority of Zimbabwe. Silabo njalo abe-EMA. I think they are here putting in place implementing various pieces of legislation to make sure that our environment is conducive for economic development of the province. Silabo njalo abe-ZIA, Zimbabwe Investment Authority, the name speaks for itself. Silabo njalo i-presentation from ama higher institutions of learning. I'll start by recognizing Abe-NAST, and also in recognition of Abe-NAST, allow me to say we have had AMA students of INAST requesting permission from the Honorable Minister of State to carry research on solar energy. I think that is quite prudent for the development of the city. Bulawayo Poly, they are also here. Hillside Teachers College, they are here. United College of Education, they are also in attendance. Allow me to also recognize our health institutions. I saw Babuma Pande, the CEO from Pilo. I think we also have someone from UPH and Ingucheni Hospital. They are relevant to our proceedings this morning because it is the desire of this province to decongest Mpilo Central Hospital, thereby leading us to the construction of a district hospital. So they are quite relevant to our proceedings. Sile tourism sector, Mrs. Matonsi, original head where Zimbabwe Tourism Authority, together with Women in Tourism, as well as Secretary General where Women in Tourism, Madam Sheila Sitambe, and also I will recognize our churches together with sector tourism in view of their role in bringing religious tourism in the province, which to a large extent contributes to GDP of our province. We also have women in mining and also women in farming. Special mention also goes to our SMEs, sector which has played a very, very critical role in the development of our province. We also have representation from various sectors. To name just a few, Silabe Water and Sanitation, Sibelabe Healthcare, Sibelabe Transport, Textile Industry, Manufacturing, Agriculture, ngati wonke ma captains of industry, they are represented here. We also have a representation from two trusts. Firstly, Bulawayo, beautiful Bulawayo Trust, as well as Matebele and Business Trust led by Ubabu Matibela. I think the Honorable Minister of State has intimated that we need to bring AMA Trust Law together so that we come up with AMA ideas and strategies to revive Bulawayo. Allow me to also recognize and introduce the Acting General Manager for ZITF, Ubaba Nicholas Ndebele, who is hosting us this morning. We might say the venue is a bit small, but to me, it's quite appropriate that we are here because within the next 3 weeks, Baba Ndebele will be showcasing our country. But we realize that we need to firstly showcase Bulawayo before we go national. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is now my singular honor and privilege to introduce the bedrock for economic development in this beautiful province. She has not only embraced the Bulawayo is open for business mantra in line with our Vision 2030, she has also taken a bold concrete step to say, let's come together as the community of Bulawayo and speak around the ideas and strategies that will make us realize the economic development that we want for this province. In line with that, she is very, very passionate with the revival of Bulawayo, the industries in Bulawayo and the restoration of us to the former glory. To this end, she has seen it fit to spearhead our coming together to put ideas and strategies at this investment conference. My conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is around none other than the Minister of State for Provincial Affairs, Umama Honorable Judith Ngobe. Can we put our hands together as you assist me to welcome her to the podium, Honorable Minister of State.
Let's be seated. Thank you, Madam PA. Before I start, I think we need to invite Board Chairman wetu ukuthi esukume simbone we-ZITF, and if she's present. Okay. Silobaba Ndebele, if you could stand up so that people get to know you. Thank you. The Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable Ubaba Ngobizita Ndlovu, the Mayor of the City of Bulawayo, Councillor Mgoni, I'm sure he's being represented by Umoyo, the Provincial Administrator, Mama Ukei Ngube, senior government officials, JOC members, the corporate world, Baba Uchinga, our Politburo member, Ubaba Umlungisi Moyo, Imbonile Lap, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you in a special way this morning. To those who have traveled from our neighboring countries, a warm welcome to you from the province of Bulawayo. We are privileged and excited to have you with us at this time of renewed hope towards the transformation of our country. We are delighted to have the presence of government officials, industry experts, and economic specialists among us today. Before we begin, I would like to draw attention to the national disaster that befell us in the form of Cyclone Idai. By now, we are all well aware of the loss of life and extent of damage that the province of Manicaland suffered during the cyclone. I appeal to you to continue to move with hearts of generosity and the people of Manicaland and Masvingo. The province of Bulawayo is proud to host this investment conference, and we are inspired by the response of the community of Bulawayo in attendance here today. We are excited by the numerous business engagements that will arise out of this investment conference to benefit the province and the country at large. Honorable Minister of Industry and Commerce, Bulawayo Metropolitan Province is historically positioned as the country's industrial hub. We are proud to host yourself and a congregation such as this one in our province. Our deliberations here will assist in improving our regional economic status. As a nation, we need to think outside the box and remove the limitations that are in our mindset about taking our rightful place as a leading producer of value-added products. It is at this conference where we anticipate that the exchange of ideas will inspire innovative solutions to some of the challenges facing our country. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Tambutso Mnangagwa, has engaged the international community with the declaration that Zimbabwe is open for business. We would like to boldly declare that Bulawayo is open for business. And this conference has the objective to interrogate the attractiveness of our offering as a province as we journey towards our national vision to become an upper middle income economy by the year 2030. We all need to put our heads together and be focused in all our endeavors. It is for this reason that we are gathered here to share ideas and exchange notes on how best we can embrace this national vision. We need to cultivate and nurture ideas that will assist us to achieve our goals. Bulawayo Metropolitan Province welcomes you. I wish you fruitful deliberations. Siyalamukela kwa Bulawayo. You are welcome. Thank you so much.
Let's give our minister another huge round of applause as she welcomed us into her province. Right, to get the proceedings starting, one of the key things that you would need to note about the Bulawayo province is that it is a province that is strategically positioned in terms of logistics. There is no way, no border that you can reach within Zimbabwe, actually in the SADC region, without actually passing through this province. That's how key it is. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is basically logistics and transport, and this will be done by Mr. Mike Sullivan, who will be coming through here from Bulawayo as Bulawayo Logistics and Transport Hub. But let's give him a huge round of applause as he comes through as Mr. Mike Sullivan.
Oh, that's quite useful, actually. I can move around. Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much to the Honourable Minister for inviting me to come. It's very much appreciated. I'm going to make my first apology, and only one of the day, is that I'm proudly Bulawayo born and raised, and I love the city that we live in. And my talk today might be slightly myopic in that I'm going to be looking at Bulawayo as the center of everything that I talk about. So I apologize if I offend any other regions of the country, but I hope we can accept that today is a talk about Bulawayo. So, first step, there we go, right. I always think it's good to, go that way, good to look at a map of Zimbabwe, a relief map of Zimbabwe. So I'm going to step a bit further away. Because it gives us a better perspective than just looking at a flat screen, and it kind of gives us an idea as to what makes up our country and why Bulawayo is so strategic. I think the key thing we can see is this watershed, the central watershed here in the center of Zimbabwe, which I think we always need to bear in mind when we talk about logistics. Now, if you're going to approach Zimbabwe from the south or from the west, Bulawayo, you can't miss Bulawayo. Bulawayo is your gateway or your entry point into our country from these two approaches. Of course, we've got the Midlands, which you have access to, and then we've got the Mashonaland as well. But ultimately, the entry point into Zimbabwe is from Bulawayo with that approach. At the moment, we're proposing a few projects in Zimbabwe. We're looking at connecting Harare to Bite Bridge on the dualization of the Masvingo highway. We're also looking, or they're considering a plan to connect Harare to Lusaka through a railway connection through Chirundu. Now, for both of those projects, as much as they are applaudable and I can see the logic behind them, I would argue that the money that you're going to spend in this section of Zimbabwe, building the road, is going to cost a large amount of that project. In the same way, this is a beautiful part of the country. I drove down there recently into the Zambezi Valley, but you've got a very mountainous region here, and that would be a very expensive project to invest money in. You've already got an existing railway line from Bulawayo to Victoria Falls, and I was a bit squiggly on my map, but it's almost a straight line. You'd be better off investing the money by dualizing the railway from Bulawayo to Victoria Falls, would be a fraction of the cost of a new railway connection up here. In the same way, looking at where I would prioritize spending money on highways is there's not a huge difference in distance going from Harare to Bite Bridge, but coming via Bulawayo, and I'll talk about this little bypass a little bit later, and effectively you can look at it as a 2-for-1 deal, because with only 100 kilometers, you can connect in 2 borders. So you can have a connection from, if you're looking at the world from Harare, you get the Bite Bridge border, and you also get the Plumtree border post, and that will cost you a fraction of the cost as it would doing this big investment here from Harare to Bite Bridge. So again, as people from Bulawayo, we need to be saying, this is where we should be investing our money. Also, you've got very quick connections, the road construction up to rejuvenating the highway up to Zambia, and of course you can still get up through Chirundu going via Chinhoyi. And I would say looking at that as a map for the backbone of your road infrastructure network would be a much quicker way of moving people around our country. And again, keep in mind, this is the watershed. So this is where you build roads easily. I was recently involved in a house building project, and we, the lady who was building the house spent $10,000 extra just by going an extra meter on her foundations. So as soon as you're talking about backfilling and excavations, you're talking about lots and lots of money, and I think that's the problem you're going to be in this section and up in this section here as well. Whereas working with the watershed and the natural contours of our country, that I would recommend would be the backbone. Again, I am Bulawayo biased, but I'm not going to apologize again for that. I want to look at now at kind of going to zoom out a bit on Zimbabwe and just say, well, what's happening around us? Or what is the potential around us? In Namibia, you've got a railway line which connects Walvis Bay. So Walvis Bay is here, and it ends before the Botswana border, so it doesn't cross the Botswana border. We know that we've got a railway line from Gaborone. So Gaborone is down here, Francistown is up here, and of course that already links into to Zimbabwe. At the moment, we've got a dry port facility which I think is almost 100% implemented now in Walvis Bay, and we are getting trucks to drive from Bulawayo to Namibia, and they're delivering goods which are then coming to Bulawayo. And I think the idea is to clear the goods here in Bulawayo, and they're either moving through the Caprivi or they're obviously going through Botswana. Now, there is another project which has been mooted by our neighbors, Namibia and Botswana, and if we're not aware of it, we should become more familiar with it. But they are considering the Trans-Kalahari Railway Network, or railway line. So they are proposing to connect Namibia and Botswana by a railway line through the Kalahari. And at the moment, the only people involved in that conversation are Botswana and Namibia. Zimbabwe are not talking to them. They have based their model, their economic model, on transporting thermal coal from Botswana to Walvis Bay, and it's $68 a ton is their break-even price. The reason they haven't gone through with the project is because of the fluctuations in price of coal. So they think it's too much of a financial risk. But I would suggest that we have ministers here and other people within our government to pick up a phone, speak to our friends in Namibia and Botswana and say, look, let's put Zimbabwe as part of that conversation. Rather than just basing a model on Botswana and Namibia, let's look at 3 countries together and let's see how we could work together to get products moving quickly from the port. Now, another fact that we might not know, and I've had confirmation of this several times now, is that Zimbabwe have been given 100 kilometers of Namibian coastline. Apparently a document has been signed, and the more public that is made so that business people can look into it and see the details of the document, the better. But the Namibian government has said to Zimbabwe that we may develop 100 kilometers of their coastline for our benefit. Now, I would suggest that we start looking at those options and see what it is that we can do as private business people, as government, and Zimbabweans in engaging our neighbors in Namibia and Botswana. Ideally, what we want to do is we want to have goods arriving in Walvis Bay. We want a container to be picked up by a crane, put onto a train, and the next time anything touches that container would be at the clearance port here in Bulawayo. So we don't want, within 2 days from arriving in the port in Walvis Bay, we should have goods here in Bulawayo. And that's the sort of thinking and the target that we need to aim for. And we need to be asking ourselves the questions. Namibia and Botswana are our friends. Is there any reason why we have to keep putting up barriers between our countries? At what point can we take a step forward and say, is it not better that we work together and try and get this logistical movement for the benefit of all three of our countries going properly? Another link which already exists, we've got the railway line up to Victoria Falls. I've alluded to the dualization of this railway. Just want to quickly zoom in, go slightly off topic here, but I think it's worth mentioning it. I would suggest that when you approach Victoria Falls, we need to look at a bypass of Victoria Falls itself. So when we're looking at this railway line, we should miss out Victoria Falls to the east, or if the Zambians are not so happy with that, we could look at a bypass around to the west. And again, we have to look into that. I think you want Victoria Falls to be clear of commercial traffic. It's the World Heritage Site. We're very well known for it. And we're starting to get a lot of congestion over that very beautiful bridge. But I think we need to hand over that bridge to tourism and non-commercial traffic. And we need to looking at bypasses of Victoria Falls. Again, I can get into this is a talk in itself, so I won't go any further. But all I'm trying to do today is plant some seeds so that we're thinking along those lines. Now, that railway line, again, that we have going through, so up to Bulawayo, Victoria Falls, up to Livingston, Lusaka, goes up into the Copperbelt, and it does go into the DRC. So the line does exist, however, it's disused. I don't think it's been used for a long time. Again, I was lucky enough to go with Zimtrade last year with a delegation up to Lubumbashi. I'm never going to complain about Beitbridge border post again. Kusumbalesa border post, there were 10 kilometers of vehicles back to back, bumper to bumper going in. And on the way out, we measured it on our odometer. It was 13.2 kilometers going back in the other direction. Beitbridge is a paradise. Yeah? Okay? So, all we need to do is looking at this railway line, I would say, is we need to look at that little bypass in Victoria Falls, and we need to try and find a way. Again, it's having conversations with our neighbors. We need to speak to the people in the DRC and say, look, you guys want to trade with us. They look at us as Zimbabweans very favorably. They want to do business with Zimbabweans, and they keep asking, where are all the Zimbabweans? Because you guys are not here in the DRC, even though we've got good relations with each other. So we need to start having those conversations, and I would suggest we need to get the trucks off the road, and we need to get them onto the railway lines. That would be our aim. Another link, which is probably not as well known, we do have a link to Maputo. It comes in through Gonarazu, and it comes into the Dabuka just south of Gweru, and then of course you can connect down into Bulawayo from that line. So just looking at the big picture then, we've got our line from Walvis Bay, which is again we're trying to propose that we get that line moving. We have a link to Maputo, and then we've got our link into the hinterland of Central Africa. And that connects Bulawayo very nicely to that region. And what I would say is we need to start looking at this as our target region and saying, look, Bulawayo is a gateway or a logistics entry point to southern and central Africa. These are the areas, or this is the area where Zimbabweans, we need to be saying, well, what are the advantages of operating out of Bulawayo? How can we operate a logistics hub out of Bulawayo and service these areas? Now, I haven't mentioned South Africa. I do like South Africa. I've got family members in South Africa. But I think the more we can build resilience so that we are not completely dependent on South Africa, the better. And I think looking at this, I would say you've got your opportunity then. You've got a port on the Atlantic Ocean. You've got a port on the, I'm going to get it completely wrong, Indian Ocean. So there's your resilience. Of course, we can still trade with South Africa. Of course, we still interact with them. But I think it's important, and I think our neighbors recognize it as well, that we need to be able to rely on ourselves and not always just get everything from South Africa. I find that what tends to happen is most of our goods come from South Africa, and most of the goods that go into South Africa come from China. So all we're doing is we're paying the South African markup that they pay on their goods. We need to be dealing with people directly, not going through several people before goods get to us. It then gives us more efficiency as we move forward. Okay, looking at the road network, I just want to again zoom out to our other neighbors that we're looking at. There's a problem in Botswana. So good friends of ours, they don't know what to do with Selebi Piqui. So Selebi Piqui is a deserted town. It was a nickel mine many years ago, but they've poured millions of dollars into this town and they can't develop it. Now the problem is you've got a highway going from Francistown to Gaborone, and in order to get to South Africa, you can either go through Gaborone or you go through Martinsdrift this side. So Selebi Piqui is kind of just it's a nowhere land, and I would suggest that Bulawayo might have an answer for them on this one. So looking at the road network, I would suggest we need another border crossing, and we need to take a road, the Matopus, the Kezi, Mapisa road. We extend that down into Botswana. You have a new border crossing from Zimbabwe to Botswana, a new border crossing from Botswana into South Africa. You then answer Selebi Piqui's problem because you can then link them into that network. So you've got a trade corridor coming from Matabeleland South into Botswana. You could then also make our friends in Matabeleland South happy by linking in Gwanda into that network. And I think you've got an existing border crossing at Mpoings, which is a nice border crossing if you want a quiet crossing, but it's quite difficult to get to. But if you connected that network up, you've then got two communities. And again, all of this involves talking to our neighbors. But we've got the Matabeleland South community, which as a lot of us from Zimbabwe, or Bulawayo will be aware, have been a neglected community for many years. And you've got this community in Botswana, which has also been a neglected community. So you're linking these two communities together. You're creating a trade corridor, which would obviously provide, hopefully, wealth and jobs for both of those communities. And again, that's another proposal I think needs to happen. So looking at Bulawayo itself then, so zooming in, hopefully we've got our geography of Bulawayo, okay? This is Bulawayo here. You can see more or less where my factory was when I took that photo. And this is the airport, the Joshua Nkomo Airport at the top. I propose that we put a bypass in. So just to get you guys familiar, this is the Victoria Falls Road. This is the Turk Mine Road. This is the Harare Road. And this is the road that leads to Johannesburg. So bypassing Bulawayo, I think, is the way to rejuvenate Bulawayo. What you then end up with is you end up with nodes, so transport nodes, where you can invest in logistics, warehousing, and other facilities that enable the fast and swift movement of goods. So at those 4 points, you've then got an opportunity to create little transport hubs, mini transport hubs or logistics hubs, which we can then develop. And again, I'd be interested to see what people say about special economic zones. There might be other ways that think tanks could work around those zones. The second thing we need to do, again, if you're not aware of it, the railway line at the moment leading from to South Africa actually comes down this way. We've got the rail link coming down from Victoria Falls, comes in this way, and it kind of does a lot of curves, and then eventually goes out on the Harare Road and goes out here. What I suggest we do is we pull that railway line across and connect directly with the junction at Hini. So we've now pulled those two across, and then what we end up with is a hub at the airport. So we've now connected our major systems. We've got a rail system, we've got our road system, and then we've got our air network, and then that gives us a great opportunity to zone this whole area here, and we say, look, we are going to make this into a 21st century transport hub. And the advantage that we have over other, maybe more developed areas is that there's nothing there. Well, I appreciate that some people have got some farms and things. I think I spoke to someone this morning. Sorry about that. But we'll pay you a good amount of money for it, I'm sure. But the basic idea is we then turn this zone into our new, we almost refocus Bulawayo. The same as what they had to do in Johannesburg. They did the same to Atlanta City, was a deadbeat city in the 1970s. You take the center out, you refocus the center, we develop that center, and then what we do is we then reconnect that center back into Bulawayo, and we bring life back to Bulawayo from that new centre. And again, this is just me being a little bit, I don't know how far this would go, but just looking at bringing that train in. Again, I think when I was talking to the guys about it, instead of the Khao train, we could call it like the Bulu train or something, or the Bula train. You guys can come up with your own name. But I thought a place to put it maybe would be the race course. People have been struggling to find anything for that. So you could have your hub, which would sit in the center of the race course, and then that feeds into your distribution network within the city. And again, I'm not a detail person. I kind of look at broader pictures, but I would suggest that that's something that we could look into. The nice thing is you've got, we keep talking about NUST. It's obviously a key development zone for us. We've got other development out to off the Joburg Road. So this is a very key area, and I would say that, looking at something along those lines. And we need some investment in that Ascot racecourse as well. So yeah, that's that proposal. So looking at the air network, or just as the hub, almost get depressed when you look at, I picked Emirates. So they're so lucky. They've got Asia over here, they've got Europe over here, obviously they've got America, and everything, the Middle East is perfectly in the center. It acts as a great hub. So unless we wait for a couple of million years for plate tectonics to take effect and for Africa to migrate up a bit higher, we're going to be waiting a long time. But I did think actually there is one map that does help, and I think it might link into a talk a little bit later on. They might be chuffed about it. Is that if we look at the map, oh, it's got a bit block. If we look at this is the world map. Sorry, I don't know why the other countries haven't come on, but this is effectively the map of the BRICS countries. And I think if you looked at the world economically in terms of BRICS, you've obviously got a link to Brazil, you've got Russia, you've got India, you've got China, and of course you're linked to South Africa. Now I would suggest that we need to get a little bit more involved in BRICS. So when we say BRICS, maybe instead of South Africa, we should be saying Southern Africa, and then maybe incorporating more of Central Africa. And when we look at Bulawayo in relation to these countries, we are quite a central node. So we need to look at trading relationships. We need to practice our Portuguese and Spanish maybe, as well as our Chinese, and start looking at trading relationships with these countries. And we are the center, or the central focus for that. Another thing to look at, just coming into close now, is that China are investing heavily in their Silk Highway. So they are making strategic moves, and I think quite recently in Italy, they've just signed there's $2 billion agreement in Rome to finally connect up their Silk Highway. They're coming in very strong on the east coast of Africa. And so in terms of global politics, there's another superpower that's trying to look at ways that they could combat China. I think we should work with both. I'm not advocating we pick one over the other. I think we can trade with both. But the Americans are looking for ways to come into Africa. And I would think that Bulawayo can position itself well, especially with the OPEC promising an investment of up to $200 billion in infrastructure projects in Africa that assist American businesses. And I think you would sell the model of saying, look, Americans, you guys can come here. We've got a trading port for you. We talk to Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. We develop the port. We develop a railway link. And of course, we've got a beautiful city which is going to act as your logistics hub. And you are going to have access to the southern and central African markets through this beautiful city, which is Bulawayo. Thank you very much.
Let's give Mike another huge round of applause. Thank you, Mike, for that wonderful presentation. The beautiful thing that Mike has done by opening the platform is that he has taken us to have a bigger picture in terms of looking at the city of Bulawayo, looking at it from a global perspective, then zoning it down to actually look at what opportunities lie for Bulawayo within the southern part of Africa, and actually just asking us to be a little bit open-minded about how we do our business, and that's a very, very good thing. Thank you, Mike, for opening. The only thing that I would say to you, Mike, is as the previous honorable speaker, I would say just withdraw the apology for saying that you're going to focus on Bulawayo. Just withdraw that apology. But otherwise, thank you very much for that presentation. Right. After Mike giving us an open-minded view and a hawk's eye perspective looking at Bulawayo. The next speaker will be looking at actually investing within the city of Bulawayo. What opportunities lie within the city of Bulawayo and the province of Bulawayo. And this will be done by Lungile Moyo. Please give him a round of applause as he comes through to give that presentation of investing in the city of Kings and Queens. Please give a round of applause. Please make way for the lady coming through. A round of applause as she comes through.
It's a very good morning to everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Captains of Industry, the investors of Bulawayo, and the speakers. Mr. Mike, thank you very much for giving us hope in the Bulawayo that we love so much. Thank you so much for attending this conference, so we can get to interact and talk about our beautiful Bulawayo, the city of kings. I love Bulawayo very much because I was born and bred in Bulawayo. It's very close to my heart. And every time we're talking about investing in Bulawayo, people will say to you, why then do you want to waste money? We're not wasting money. We're actually reviving the beautiful city of Bulawayo, which will give us an income, because it once did, and it still will give us an income as long as we all have faith in what we're doing. And I was looking at the logistics, and part of my presentation was going to touch on that. I'm not going to go to that because he has done justice to it already, and thank you very much for that. And we are saying, as investors, we are saying we're looking at opportunities to put our money. When we put our money, we want returns. And when we look at the way Bulawayo has been structured, we look at sanctions, we look at everything else, the neighboring countries, we are saying, yes, we can work together because we are not in isolation. As Bulawayo province, being the central of Southern Africa in terms of logistics, and it's located very nicely in terms of investments, we are saying we have hope in Bulawayo. And we are willing to rebuild Bulawayo. How do we do that? We do that by infrastructure funding, and we do that by infrastructure funding, and we do that by banking solutions. We do that by helping the rail networks. We do that by mining data. And we are saying we have to be in communication with the rest of the world if we are to invest. Right? When we're putting our money in infrastructure funding, someone will say to me, will you get your money back? Yes. I will get my money back when I finance City of Bulawayo, because I have seen what City of Bulawayo has in store for us. The projects that they have, that they've just alluded to us to say, we've got projects that we're focusing on. And if those projects are brought to us and we fund them, we are very sure that we will get our money's worth. Why? When we look at the structures of our the setup of our special economic zones, I didn't want to touch on that, but I will just a little bit highlight on it. We look at that. People want to come and invest, but they say, what is the pull factor? That is our pull factor. We will say to funders, yes, we do have the structures which will give you X, Y, Z in terms of our special economic zones. We have funders, yes, that are saying we want to pour our money, but anyway, how do we then get our money? Because you are in sanctions. Yes, we are in sanctions, but at the same time, we have funders like Qatar that know and understand what Zimbabwe is about, and they understand how the lines of credit can be protected. We have our neighbors in Botswana in terms of banking solutions. They are willing to go with us in this investment journey that we're embarking on. And yes, we are saying, if you have projects, we are willing to invest. We have open lines of credit that we have at the moment that have been guaranteed in terms of the anticipated revenues that we are looking at as well, because we know that Bulawayo is not a dead horse. Bulawayo still has monies that it can still collect and repay its own debt without government's help, but with the community, helping one another to build the Bulawayo that we once proud of. The factories that need to be revived, and we are saying, yes, we need those factories to be revived. We are willing to invest big time. As Surgit Capital, we are saying, bring your projects, let's look at them, let's fund them. And we are going to revive Bulawayo. We are going to make sure that Bulawayo is once a city, is again a city that we will be proud of. Because the only thing that is lacking is the investment wing. If people bring their monies, people bring their projects, people start working, we become live again, the economy starts being revived again, we are a happy province. Let's bring back Bulawayo untutu zeatunga. Let's minimize the thinking that says it won't happen. Yes, it will happen. It will happen. Lines of credit are open. Investments opportunities are there. And yes, Bulawayo is a hub that will draw a lot of money if we look at it the right way and if we invest it with our heart and we put our mind where we want to go as a people of Bulawayo. And I'm saying again, our president is saying Zimbabwe is open for business. Yes, we are open for business. Don't close those opportunities. Let us help the president realize the dream, the vision that he has for us as a people of Zimbabwe. We are saying invest in Bulawayo. We are willing to invest in Bulawayo, yes, because we have a common goal. A goal that says Bulawayo will be revived again. I thank you very much.
On your proposal, I think it's a very good proposal that you are putting across. But the challenge that I have at the moment, I'm just thinking about the present infrastructure that we have. Like you are proposing maybe a new railway line, but already we have a railway line which is not being utilized. I don't know whether you can have some solution on how we can leverage in the short term, leverage on the existing infrastructure, like the railway line that we have, which is not being used, before we venture maybe long term to construct another railway line. Because an investor might even ask and say, currently you have this infrastructure that you are not utilizing, and you are now proposing another infrastructure which will run parallel to the already existing infrastructure. So I don't know how we can utilize this one which is not being utilized.
Thank you. No, good questions. I think I'm not actually proposing huge railway lines in terms of Bulawayo. It's just that the bypass is quite a local one, so it's only a few kilometers. I wouldn't do the Bulawayo to Victoria Falls one until that line is operating at a proper capacity. But I think your question about, I think the idea is you need to have a plan. There's no point us sitting here and saying we want Bulawayo to be revitalized, but we've got no direction as to where we want to go. But I think what we want to do is we want to put a marker in the sand, or we want to put a target and say, look, we want to aim for this as what we want to develop our infrastructure towards. And in the meantime, we obviously rejuvenate what we can and use what we can to generate the income to then move towards that. But if we allow development without planning, then what's going to happen is by the time it comes to implementing some of these plans, we would have already shot ourselves in the foot by maybe putting things in the wrong place. So I think it's a case of putting a target up there and saying, is this what we want? If that's what we want, let's aim for it. And of course, we will have to build towards it slowly rather than doing it overnight.
There's a question behind you, Nkosi.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that presentation. Hi, everyone. My name is Tando from Youth for Innovation Trust. Your presentation was good because it had that global outlook, which we appreciate a lot. But then it was kind of a bit silent on the skills development, because as much as it is taking a global outlook, we would need to invest in technologies, different technologies that would require that work to be done. So how can you talk about those skills development within Bulawayo?
I think it's going to be market driven, and again, it's all about reaching a tipping point where we want to create Bulawayo into a logistics hub, and it takes a bit of investment in order to get us over that point. But once we tip, then everything starts to become viable. I think we've got footprints in place, like we've got NUST, and I'm aware of your incubation hub that you were talking about earlier as well. So we've got these things in place, but we need the market then to put the money in to start driving those skills. And as the market increases, there will be a demand for those skills, and we'll probably find that we're a bit short of those skills, and we'll need to train up quite quickly. But we've got the potential, and I think I'm confident. If you look at that picture of NUST, they've only built, I think, 20 out of the hundreds of buildings that they were trying to build. So all of the potential is there to increase it, but we need the market to allow us to invest in those skills. But they are important.
Fantastic. Smana?
Thank you, Mike. Good presentation. What role should Bulawayo play in preparation for the much talked about North-South corridor? The North-South corridor is the one that starts from Durban, passing through Bulawayo, Vic Falls, right up to Djibouti. I think there is quite a lot of investment coming. How should we start preparing for that?
I think ultimately when it comes to transport and logistics, we have to make sure that we don't become a stop. And that's what you need with logistics. What's already happening to us, if you just look at Kazungula Bridge, it's a classic example of Zimbabwe being bypassed because we are seen as an obstacle to development. And I think we've got to say, look, we've got to make sure our railway line is working, first of all, so that if someone puts their train on the line and it goes through Byte Bridge, they know that it's going to get from one side of the country to the other side of the country without any delays. So we've got to look and say, well, how are we running at the moment? And we want things to move. I think in Africa, unfortunately, we've got this habit of saying whenever we've got a border post, we must slow people down and delay their trips. We've got to try and be part of a system that says if something lands in Durban, lands in Walvis Bay, within a day or two, it arrives at its destination in Central Africa. And if Zimbabwe gets known as a place that things move through easily, it's like water. If you pour water onto something, it's always going to flow through the lowest path. And we want to be the path of least resistance through Southern Africa. So everyone must look at Zimbabwe and say, look, as soon as I enter Zimbabwe, within a couple of hours, I'll be out the other side. We have to stop getting into this habit of I must take everything off the cargo, slow it down before it can get through. If we are known as a country where things move freely and quickly through us, then that development will naturally come towards us because people are confident to use us as a logistics hub.
Thank you. Another question for Mike?
Well, Mike, I think your presentation was very good, but I didn't hear you ever referring to some ideas of leasing our railways so that they can pick up, because they've been so dilapidated that it may take many, many years with our economic situation as it is. So the easiest way is just to lease it to some people with who have money, maybe for 20, 25 years. Then after we train our people in the running of railways, after that, everything will flow. We have a situation which is very prevalent in our country, where someone will even claim and say, this is my concession or something. And there's just a mountain, there's nothing happening there for years. But if you give it to some people who have the money and develop it, I think is the shortest way of making it utilized properly.
No, thank you. That's a good point. I suppose all I was trying to do is put sort of an idea in front of you, and I was hoping that there's not a game that you can play by yourself. You need other people to think and to put business ideas to it. But I think what we need to do is we need to present a plan and say to people, this is what we're aiming for. You come with your investment, you come with the ideas. But if, for example, I think the Walvis Bay, the Trans-Kalahari is something that we should already start having conversations with. But yeah, we do need to allow investors to come forward and put the money into it. But we need to give them confidence. They need to trust us. That's the key word, is trust. So,
thank you, Mike. Do you have any more questions for Mike? All right, we've got a gentleman right here.
Good morning. You're talking about the railway line, and what I think probably you left out of the presentation is how ready is the infrastructure that we have in terms of the rail system to adapt with systems that are within the countries that surround us. Because for me, I think it's very important. It could be the reason why we don't have passage of other traffic from other countries through us.
I think the good thing is the railway that we have, it's the same gauge. It's the Cape gauge is South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and up into Zambia. And the line that goes into Lubumbashi is also the same Cape gauge. So in terms of that infrastructure, we're fine. Where we are in, where there is a difficulty is you've got the change gauge is, I think, in the east of Zambia, northeast of Zambia. No, sorry, I lie. It's in Tanzania. That's where they change gauge. So the Chinese have come into the eastern Africa, and all of the new railway lines that they're putting in are the gauge width is 1 meter. So it's a different gauge. So you can't get locomotives compatible with that railway network. But in terms of the network we're talking about, we're okay up to Lubumbashi. But again, it does give some impetus on speed, because you've got competing businesses in Africa. The Chinese are coming in, and if they put their railway lines in, our railway lines are not going to be compatible with theirs. So the further they move across, the less compatible we will be in those regions. So we do need to move quickly in terms of making sure we consolidate on the lines that are already there. But they need a lot of work. It's true.
Thank you, Mike. Any more questions for Mike? All right, we've got a question by the door right there.
Thanks, Mike. For potential exporters, I think one of the challenges we are facing is that if we want to get horticultural produce from Bulawayo to the EU, for example, we've got to take it up to Harare, because I think that's the whole cold chain, and the international flights don't fly from Bulawayo. It's a big challenge for us, and is the difference between winning or losing. And so, is there any kind of thinking with regards to, especially that hub that you have around the airport? What are we doing about cold storage, about attracting international flights back so that we can export? Because we have the potential to produce. We're doing it, some of us, and but we need to be able to make it cheaper and more affordable so that more players can get involved.
So absolutely, I think you've kind of given all the answers. I mean, ultimately, what we need is we need to reach a tipping point so that you're not the only person who's exporting your goods. We need to create enough of a critical mass around Bulawayo so that there's a justification for getting those flights. And there might be, like what they did, unfortunately, with the Emirates, they had the money to invest in the airline, and they created the critical mass themselves. We are in a position, do we borrow the money to put the flights in? It's like the chicken and egg. Because once you've got one connection, it then leads to other connections, and then the more connections you have, it goes exponential after a while. So we've got to get to a tipping point where we have enough businesses, enough interest to be able to justify those flights. But absolutely, I would say that's exactly what we need to do at the airport, is we want to be able to get our goods onto a plane at Joshua Nkomo, and it needs to be able to be exported EU, China, South America. We need to be moving from Bulawayo instead of having to go everywhere else. But we need to get to the critical mass, and we need to get to the tipping point, and the more people like you who come forward, we can get to that point where we tip, and then we go forward.
Thank you, Mike. Any more questions for Mike before we call the next presenter to come and take questions? Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Great. Let's give Mike a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Right, so as Lungile is coming up to take your questions, I know most of us, we do have smartphones and we are following what's happening. If you have anyone that you know would be interested in actually listening into this session, they can live stream it from the ZITF company YouTube channel. They just look for the ZITF company YouTube channel, then they can definitely be able to watch the proceedings. They're being streamed live as we speak. And also on Facebook, on the site Facebook page, site spelled as CITE Facebook page, they can be able to catch all this action that is happening, and as well we can be able to get some in briefs of questions coming through from those that are watching us. Also tweet about it, hashtag BYO Investment Conference. That's the hashtag if you're going to tweet about it, and also check the proceedings from there. Right, so do we have any questions that we have for the beautiful lady up here who spoke about investing in Bulawayo? Any questions for Lungile about her presentation about investing for Bulawayo, investing in Bulawayo? Right, we've got a question right there in the center. Thank you, Gosi, for being the speedy gentleman that you are.
Thank you for your presentation, Lungile. You mentioned briefly something about data mining as an investment opportunity. May you please elaborate on that one briefly, because you passed through it.
Thank you very much. Okay, what I said is we are into infrastructure development, project financing, right? When you bring your project to us, we look at it and we finance if it suits the structure of being financed, right? So in data mining, what we have realized is there's a lot of opportunities in us having to have our own stations to store our data than having to rely on having our data savers being maybe in Davos in Switzerland. We can have someone building those reserves here, those stations here to store our data in Zimbabwe, in Bulawayo, especially with us having these special economic zones that we're probing for, that we will get in anyway. So instead of us having our data being stored elsewhere, we can have it here and mine it here. That's the mentioning in terms of infrastructure development and how data mining is.
Thank you, Lungile.
As a project, yes.
Great. We've got a question outside there.
Thank you very much. Good presentation from Lungile Moyo. I would like to find out whether you have got anything like tax holidays for investors in Bulawayo in terms of reduced rates, reduced water charges, prices for business stands, and particularly I had a friend who has been battling to try and get a resident permit. Would you be involved in such things, in helping investors to quickly get residence permits? Thank you.
Okay, that is not a question for me. I'm talking about giving you money to do business. I'm talking about a project that you have that you want financed. I don't know if I'm answering you. Sorry, sir.
Okay, he's coming back shortly. Oh, it says okay. All right.
It's okay, thank you.
Ngozi, just before we get a question from there, we'd like to get a response.
Good morning. Just in response to the gentleman's last question regarding tax holidays, reduced water rates and incentives for investors, that information will come up from the presentation from the Bulawayo City Council, as she pointed out. So after tea, Bulawayo City Council will give us a presentation on all the incentives that they have for attracting investment into Bulawayo.
Thank you. We've got a question.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. A lot of fertile land is lying idle in the western suburbs, which can be utilized for export horticulture if invested into. For example, we've got suburbs like Chabalala, Nkulumani, and Chube. Don't look down upon these David Land and just concentrate on Goliath.
I suppose that's a comment, ma'am, not a question.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you for your comment, ma'am.
It's a comment.
Right.
Okay. Because what I've said is, if there is a project that you've earmarked for such places, bring it to us. Let us help each other. Like you're saying, there's virgin land that's lying underutilized. Bring that project. Let's look at it. Then let's see if we can help each other in terms of financing the project that you have your eye on.
Fantastic. Right, we've got a question right here.
It's not a question, but a comment on the issue of data mining. I think those are services that are actually available. If you look at the likes of Tel One, we actually set up data centers across the country, Bulawayo, Mazoe, Harare. So those services are available. I think what we actually need to be dealing with and working on is a mind shift and a shift in the mindset of the people, because right now people aren't using those services, but they prefer to use the physical storage type of thing.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Do you have another question for Lungile?
Thank you very much, Lungile. Just out of Sajid, you said Sajid, right? Yeah. You guys are supposedly fund managers, right? Financiers. Okay, good. So now tell me what model are you going to come with around the aspect? I know there's the risk factor, you know, Zimbabwe being what it is. What measures have you come up with as financiers? Have you come up with ways in which investment can be protected and return on investment is realized?
Thank you very much for that question. It's very interesting. Remember when I started presenting, I talked about the sanctions that we have. However, we have people that we work with in neighboring countries. For example, we're into banking solutions as well. We have our neighbors like Botswana that are willing to assist us, especially in terms of project financing, so that we secure our investments in this crucial time where Zimbabwe is going through sanctions for now. But we are looking into a situation whereby, let's say, for example, America, that is sanctioned us, would not look at investing in Zimbabwe for now. If they want to invest, they can invest maybe in a project that we take from Botswana, for example, and then we can bring it to Zimbabwe. But directly into Zimbabwe, the security is very questionable at the moment. However, we're not saying it's not doable. There's always ways around them.
Great.
Thank you. I'm Mavis Falalapanda. My question actually was the same as the gentleman who's just questioned you. I was just going to ask, what about, are you considering diaspora as well? We've got family, children out there. How can they benefit if they want to invest?
Can you be a little bit specific? What about the diaspora?
I'm talking about the funding and all. They also want to know that, is it safe to come back home? Is it safe to invest back home? That's what I'm talking about. Let's not forget them.
Thank you very much. When you talk about diaspora, when we are saying invest in Zimbabwe, we as financiers, we invest big time, we're willing to take the risk, remember that? However, when it's a small project, you might find that the risk is very high for that person. But we are saying we are funding infrastructures like the rail systems that he's talking about. Those we can fund. Like the dry ports, those we can find. And those are big investments with a big risk. However, it's not as big risk as when it's an individual that's doing the investment. And someone talked about agricultural products. We're actually looking into that as well, because we do have a proposal in our hand for having a cargo airline, which we are busy with at the moment, and it's getting to finalization. We will have something like that, where when we have our dry ports and we're having more airports, that we obviously have people that have approached us in terms of that. right? We will have cargo that will be taking off from Bulawayo to Germany, for example, because we've got a lot of agricultural products that they need in Germany. So there is something along those lines, but however, you bring the projects to us, let's look at them, let's see how we can help each other, but there is something in the pipeline for that.
All right. Thank you, Lungile. We're going to take a short break and go for tea. We'll be coming back and we'll continue, and then we're going to have another question and answer segment a little bit later in the program. So what's going to happen is that our top table